Batra Daf Peter Amura Aleph, few lines from the top. The Mishnah said, "Makom shenagul lamod begasa." If you had a measure, if you had a custom to measure with a large one, don't use small, and vice versa. We're gonna have this a few times over the next couple of days. Siman, when it says siman, then it quotes a few words. Basically, the Gemara is going to be quoting a few bidaitot or type of stories or topics. So they do is they put a siman and they mention one word from each topic. En ma'anin be'en gochin, ba'argad min, balitra, salsha, be'aiser, nefesh, mishkalot, mimahek, ave, lo ta'asu, lo ya'aseh. Let's go for the first one. Tanabaram. Minayin, how do we know? She'en mahakim b'makom shegochin, be'en gochin shemakom mahakin. I know that we don't level in a place where people stack high, and we don't stack high in a place where people usually level it. The pasuk says, "Efa shulema," perfect measure. And how do we know that if one person said, you know what, I'll level it out, but because I'm leveling it out, even though it's a place that I heap it, I'll reduce the amount. I'll reduce the price because I'm leveling it. How do we know? Or vice versa. I'll heap it instead of leveling it out, but I'll add more price per measure to make up for it. We don't listen to the Lach, do what you're supposed to do with the measurements. How do I know? We don't balance the scale in the place where usually you tilt it, like we said earlier. You tilt it in a place where you don't balance it. We usually balance it. The says, eventually, perfect weight. How do I know? I'll balance it in a place even though we'll usually tilt it and I'll just reduce the price, or vice versa. I'll tilt even though I'm supposed to balance and I'll add to the price. Change the maybe. Let's all the mother pasuk said eventually do what you're supposed to do. You should not have in your house. You should not have this type of things in this house. You should not have the money in your house. What's the reason? Because person gets cursed. If a person keeps a large measure and a small measure, yani incorrect measurements in his house, the person will get poor, God forbid. Don't have it in money in your pouch. Because of the weights. But eventually, Pasuk's blessing you that if you do have correct weights in your house, you don't have bad ones, then you will have money. You shall you'll have a perfect weight. Teaches you we can appoint like supervisors to make sure that everybody has the correct weights and measurements. But we don't appoint supervisors for prices. We don't make sure people are checking the price gouging. One story, the house of the Nasi appointed a supervisor for the weights and the prices. Shmuel told Karna, go out and tell them, the Batra specifically says, that we only hold the supervisors for the price, for the measurements and the weights, but not for pricing. And the fact that Ashur Karna went out, however, he taught that you have the supervisors for both weights and prices. He went against Shmuel's words. When Karna came back, Shmuel asked him, what's your name? He answered him Karna, which is a word that's a play on the word horn. Tepukle Karna be'aina, he cursed him. Let a horn grow in your eye. Nafkale Karna be'aina, a horn grew in Karna's eye because he didn't listen to Shmuel. Some people say it was an actual horn or like a pimple or a cataract. Okay. Come on, Sarah. Why did Karna go against Shmuel? Who do you hold like? He held the following. He holds like Rabbi Rahama that we do hold supervisors, we appoint supervisors for weights and measurements because we want people to start price gouging. If a customer wanted to buy a litra of meat, of merchandise, shokela litra, you measure him a litra. Hatzi litra, you wanted a half a litra, shokela hatzira, use a weight for half litra. Revi litra for a quarter litra, shokela revi litra, you weigh him for a quarter litra. The word says, Michael Mashlom, it's the Hidush. Hazak Baruch. 1 pound, 1 pound, half pound, half pound. Okay, Hazak Baruch. The word says, we only have the weights until that amount. The quarter litra is the lowest weight. If a person wanted to buy 3/4 litra of meat, lo yomar lo, don't tell him, weigh 3 separate quarter liters at a time. Because that will add too much because he'll have to tilt it every single time. So what should he do? You should take a 1 litra, litra basar. put a full litra, let's say a full pound, quote unquote, and then you take the 3/4 of meat and a quarter litra weight on top of the other side to even it out. Okay, Taraban. I'm a vacation menu. I said a litrin. For one guy wanted to buy 10 liters of meat. Don't tell the merchant, do 1 pound at a time, do 1 liter at a time, and then you have to tilt it every time and give me bonus. Do one shot, and he has to give only one tilt at the end. Nefesh Maoznaim, the way you build the scale, the picture, the classic picture of a scale, as Rosh Hashanah's coming up, a picture of a scale, whether it's on the top of the ground, hanging from the ceiling, from the ground, you have the vertical pole going up or down, and the horizontal pole that connects it, and that perpendicular point that connects those two is called the fulcrum. And then there's the two cups, the two pans that weigh things. So the way you build it is that fulcrum must be 3 tvachim from the ceiling. And if it's up from the ground, you have to be 3 tvachim from the ground. And the beam and the strings have to be 12 tvachim in length. And the wool and merchants, for example, that their scales has to be 2 tvachim from the ceiling. Only 2 tvachim from the ground. The reason is because we don't want it to. And the bigger the thing is, and the less it weighs, it makes a difference in how much it sways and hits the ground and might readjust itself incorrectly. Therefore, we're telling you there's certain measurements and certain things. The heavier it is, the more space you need. The less heavier it is, the less space you need. And the beam and the string to be 9 tvachim. The storekeeper and house guy's scales only 1 tefach, and 1 tefach above the ground. And you just need 6 tvachim in length. But a guy who's doing precious metals, heavy stuff, 3 tvachim. Sorry, not precious metals. Precious metals means the diamonds and gold. You don't measure that much at a time. You only need 3 finger breadths, the size of 3 fingers. And 3 tvachim. 3 finger breadths rather from the ground. I don't know the exact size of the length of the string and beams. Okay. So we mentioned the second case is what type of merchants they would have, like precious metals or wool. What was the first one that we mentioned? Our Papa says the grumi. These guys were melting, were selling smelted metals and ironsmiths and coppersmiths. They do heavy metals. That's why you need a big one. The same way that you had to make sure to have these type of scales and these sizes. So too, when you're making them, they only become tameh if they're considered a kli, and these are the measurements in order to become tameh. Mishnah said elsewhere, the scale of a storekeeper. We had to teach over there the size of the strings and the beam because we didn't mention it in our Mishnah, as we said that we don't know how big it is. Okay. Weight should not be made. Lo shel ba'as, not of tin. Lo shel avar, not of lead. Lo shel gistro, not of alloy. These are very heavy things. Lo shel any type of metal. You should make it of stone, which has a or glass. The leveler, which is the stick that you would take to flatten the pile across, you would sweep it across the top, should not be made of a gourd, because it's very light and it won't even it. It won't flatten it evenly. Not a metal, too heavy, it'll take off too much. Make it of olive wood, if it goes or walnut wood, which is shikma, sycamore, or boxwood. The level should not be made. One side thick, one side narrow, because it also will not take it. The narrow part will penetrate deeper. Don't sweep the entire thing in one shot. It's bad for the seller and good for the buyer because it doesn't level out correctly. Don't do it too small. Because that's bad for the buyer and good for the seller because it goes much more. On all these things, all these bad measurements, and all these things that he's saying don't do. Yochanan was scared of saying it because he said, if I say it, I have to. I don't want to say it, but it's bad for me to say it. Bad for me not to say it. Even if I say it, then people will learn how to cheat. If I don't say it, then the people who are cheaters are going to say, "Oh, The rabbis don't know what we're doing. We can handle it. We could cheat everybody. Therefore, the rabbi wasn't sure what to do. Ibai said, Amara lo Amara. Did you end up teaching it or not? He said it. And what pasuk did he learn to say that I have to teach it, even though people might learn the bad things? Ki yisharim b'darki Hashem. The ways of Hashem are straight. The righteous people will take it correctly and straight and do good things, but the wicked will stumble in it. This is a very, very famous concept that a person could take anything and twist it. If a person wants to take the most purest thing and twist it to the negative, he can. So it's over here. Like I said, I have to teach it. The good will do good, and the bad will do bad regardless. When it says don't do bad with measure, don't measure bad with land. Don't use the same rope from the summer months and the winter months, because it gets thicker during the summer months because it gets moist. We had this Gemara almost a half a year ago in Baba Messiah. Regarding weights, don't dip your weights in salt because it'll change it. Regarding measurements, liquid, don't let your liquids, don't froth it, because the way you pour it, you make it frothy, you're cheating the guy out. But now kavachomer can make misura in a misura shehi echat mishloshim v'shisha belog. It's a measurement only of a 36th of a log. It's like I believe it is. What did we say it was? It's like a half an ounce. The Torah said was very nervous about Kavachomer, so for sure, Lehin v'Hatzihin v'Shitahin v'Ritahin v'Log v'Hatzi log v'Tuman v'Hatzi tuman v'Uchla. All these other measurements where we have to be careful about froths and everything, which are much bigger than a half an ounce, that you definitely be more careful. A person should not have an incorrect measurement in his house, a bowl of some sort. If it's incorrect, if it's not accurate, don't keep it in your house. Even if you're using it as a urinal, even if you're using it for something disgusting that you're not going to all of a sudden use it for measurements, you should still not have it, just in case. This is the only place where there was no seals on those items. So if the government needed to have a seal in your measurements in order for sales, then you don't have to be makpid, because you can assume that the guy won't buy it from him because there's no seal on it that it's good. In case there is a seal, the guy won't buy it, therefore no problem. And even in a place where there's no seals, you can also keep it if there are spot checks being carried out. There's mashkiachs walking by. The people are passing by, let them by, you don't have to be nervous. That's what Rabbi holds. But the Gemara says, no, we don't hold like that. Even if there are people passing by, even if there are people checking in, the inspectors. Because maybe a guy is going to come right before Shabbat to buy something from you. He'll take this measurement to measure for you, and he'll steal from you because no inspector there. Says as well, person should not have an incorrect measure in his house, even if it is if it's used for urinal. A person should make for himself the following measurements: a measurement, a tarkav, half a tarkav, kav, hazi kav, berova, kav, half kav, quarter kav, v'tomen, v'hatzi tomen, an eighth of an eighth, v'uchla, and also an uchla. V'kama uchla, how big is an uchla? Echad mahamisha berevia, a fifth of a quarter kav, which is a little bit over the size of an egg. Umidat mela halach hu oseh, and for liquid measurements, he should make the following: hin v'hatzihin, shlisahin, revitahin, hin half hin, third hin, quarter hin, v'log v'hatzi log, revitahin shminit, log, half log, quarter, and an eighth. V'had mishmar shminit, and an eighth of an eighth. V'zeh kortov, and the eighth and eighth is called a kortov. L'abid namik b'ayim. So how come you don't have a double kav? Why if you make why only tar kav, which is 3 kav? Maybe you make a 2 kav. Where it says atilahuf b'kav, a person might be confused with a 3 kav, and he might make a mistake. Whereas alma ta'u and shibtlitas, if you see the person can make a mistake in a third, that's the case. You shouldn't make a kav. That's kav, because that can be mixed up with a half a kav, which is a third difference. The Gemara says the reason why you don't use a double kav measurement is because you might be confused with a half kav, which is 1.5. This is a quarter, 25%. Okay, now that we think that we make mistakes with a quarter difference, we shouldn't make the a half of an eighth of a kav, and an uchla, that's an eighth of an eighth. There's also a quarter difference. Where it says those type of measurements are so small, people are going to notice, and people are much more careful, and therefore those type of measurements to be careful. Gemara says, okay, so she's tahin v'eithin nami glaved, so therefore a person should not be measuring a third of a hin and a quarter of a hin. It's a quarter difference. Gemara says, given the habit mikdash logas, those measurements of a third of a hin and a quarter of a hin were only used in the Bet HaMikdash, and therefore we don't have to worry. Gemara said, okay, so make the decree that Bet HaMikdash should not have it either. Gemara said, the famous concept you have throughout Shas, Kohanim is the reason the Kohanim who are doing the Bet HaMikdash services are very careful. We can trust them because they go above the letter of the law, and therefore we're not worried. Amen. Amen.